So I want to introduce you to our, before I introduce Dr. Graham, I have to say I'm at the airport, so that's the background noise that you hear. And they had to wait till I started talking. We have Dr. Charles Graham from Brigham Young University with us today to talk to us about K-12 blended teaching competencies. And we are hosting this webinar as part of my presidential duties with the Division of Distance Learning with AECT. I had planned to host 5 webinars, so this is the 4th out of the 5 series webinar. And so, Dr. Graham, I'm going to hand it over to you. We're going to, we're here, excited, and ready to learn from you.
Great, thank you, Florence. Appreciate your doing these duties even from the airport. That's awesome. So. I've heard from some of you. I think our group is small enough that I'd like to just quickly go through and do introductions. If we could just start, just share your name and where you're from, and if you're a graduate student, if you're a faculty, if you're doing ID somewhere, that'll help me to kind of be able to tailor things a little bit more to your needs. So as I call out your name, you can just do that. Beth?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Beth O'Yarzin, and I'm a clinical assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I'm excited to learn from you today, Dr. Graham.
Thank you. Okay, how about CRF SCHNACJC?
Yeah, that's my username. Sorry about that. My name is John Schnock. I'm an instructional designer with Concordia University in Chicago.
Great,
and have a history in K-12 education, so I'm especially interested in this.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Jake.
Hi, my name is Jake Hall. I'm a graduate student at Syracuse University. And my dissertation focus is on the use of blended learning environments for pre-service teacher development. So,
great, thank you, Jake. Josh.
Hello, my name is Josh Fell. I'm a graduate student at University of West Florida, and I'm in the dissertation stage. And I've been reading a lot of your work, Dr. Graham. So I'm excited. Thank you very much. Great, thank you, Jake. Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine Wozniak. I am also from Concordia University, Chicago, and I am an assistant professor in instructional design and technology.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, Min.
Hey, so I'm the instructional designer from University of Utah, so we are pretty close.
Yes. Great, thank you, Min. We ought to get together in person sometime. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Jacobs. I'm on the Instructional Technology faculty at Georgia Southern University, teaching in the master's program.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Sean. Okay, we can't hear Sean. So maybe let's go to S.J. Lee.
Hi, my name is Angel Lee, and I'm assistant professor at Mississippi State University.
Great. Okay, John, I think it is. Ulrich? Did I remember correctly?
My name is Randall Ulrich, and I fulfill a dual role. I'm an instructional technical trainer at Southern Nevada Health District in Las Vegas. I also teach for a master's degree program at California State University in Sacramento.
Great, thank you. Okay, Chao Kai.
Hi, this is Chao Kai. I'm the instructional consultant and designer for Purdue University, Fort Wayne.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I wanted to I love to get to know people who are in this domain and interested in this domain. As far as my background, I'm at BYU, which is very close to Minuan's University, about 45 minutes away from University of Utah. This is a picture of my campus. I want to include just a kind of a fun picture for those who are graduate students, so you could see kind of.
Ken and I are on a trip.
You could see me back then. So this is a picture of me back in 2002 when I graduated from Indiana University. And now you can see a picture of me now going a little bit more bald and all of that kind of stuff. So I live in the state of Utah. It's a great place to visit. I hope you guys will think about coming out and visiting Brigham Young University sometime, and also visiting our, skiing or visiting our outdoors, which is a fun thing to do also while you're here. My research background is in blended learning, primarily related to blended learning in higher education. In the last couple of years, I've become more involved in research related to blended learning and teaching in the K-12 space, and that's mostly what I'll be talking about today. So I also want to acknowledge that much of the research and the things that I share with you today is not just my research. It's done in collaboration with many other people who have contributed in very strong and important ways. Here's a list of some of them: Emily Pullum and Cecil Short, who are both doctoral students here. I see that Emily just logged in, so a shout out to Emily. She can correct me if I get anything wrong here. And also Jared Borup, who's at George Mason University, and Ross Larson, who's a methodologist here, who's helped us with a lot of methodological issues. So as I mentioned before, primarily I've been involved in blended learning in the higher ed realm. And a few years ago, our state Board of Education passed a new rule, which got me thinking more carefully and more deeply about blended teaching and learning in the K-12 realm. So I've put here the additions to the rule marked in red. So in addition to teaching kind of more traditional technology integration skills for our pre-service teachers, those who are trying to get licensure, they mandated that they have coursework that helps them learn how to teach effectively in online only and blended classrooms, as well as learning how to use software for personalized learning. And so this really got me thinking about what competencies do we need to help our students have to be able to be successful in teaching in these environments. And so since then, well, I had a master's student who did some research. Her name's Laura McAllister. She did some research related to across the nation, what kind of programs what states and what university programs are offering endorsements in online teaching that allow people to officially get a certificate or endorsement for teaching in the online space. And as part of that, one of the things we realized was that a lot of things were happening in the blended learning space, but were kind of mixed in with the technology integration courses that were happening across the country. And so as we started to think about that, we started to think about, well, what are the distinctions between the skills that are needed for a K-12 teacher to be teaching fully online, or to be teaching in a blended space, or to be teaching in the kind of traditional space that we've referred to as technology integration in the past. And so in thinking about this, we developed this this matrix that helped us to kind of think about it a little more clearly, a little more specifically. Oh, by the way, I just want to say, if you have questions, if you raise your hand in Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand, and I've got the window up so I can see if you've raised your virtual hand, and I can call on you. So if you have a question at any time about the things I'm presenting, please don't wait till the end. Please ask in the moment that it's important to you. So this is how we started to think about it. We, across the top dimension, we thought about who the interaction's happening, or what the interaction's happening with. So in distance education, you can think of Michael Moore and Anderson, who have talked a lot about this idea of three major kinds of interactions: learner-content interactions, learner-instructor interactions, and learner-learner interactions. So we grouped the learner-learner and learner-instructor interactions into what we are just referring to as learner-human interactions. And then we have learner-content interactions on this other side of the dimension. And then on the vertical side of the dimension, we've included interactions that are mediated through technology in some way, and interactions that are not mediated via technology. So this has allowed us to think of these three domains. So our traditional in-person teaching tends to fall within this domain, these bottom two quadrants. And when we think about online teaching skills, it tends to fall in these top two quadrants. We dipped down into the non-digital content interaction in our online and distance learning, because oftentimes students will have a textbook mailed out to them, or maybe some science equipment or science experiment stuff that they're actually doing with physical things, and it's not technology mediated. So that's why this pink dips down a little bit into the non-digital content interactions. When we think about technology integration skills, for the most part, technology integration skills involve the same things that are happening in a face-to-face environment, but it's adding classroom-based technologies. And as you can see, we represented that by kind of pushing this pink up into the learner content interaction. And that's, that is, there's no, solid line for where that ends and where it doesn't end. But this has been our experience, that oftentimes the kinds of technologies that are used and taught in technology integration are the kinds that can be used in a classroom, and less of the personalized, adaptive, simulation-oriented kinds of things that we see in the more online space. And then, of course, a blended environment. One of the reasons why the competencies and the skills are so challenging for people who teach in a blended environment is that you may need to use all of these, the skills in all of these quadrants to teach as a blended instructor. So are there any questions so far to this point in what I've presented? Oh, I should open up the chat. Looks like we have some stuff. Okay, no questions there, but any questions so far about what I've presented? Nope. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of give you the big picture of what we're trying to do with our research and development here at BYU. This is kind of a general model that you've probably seen if you've heard about backward design, or in the higher ed realm, read anything from Fink. But the idea is, when we create instruction, we have outcomes that we focus on. We build activities and assessments that address those outcomes. And this is not unique to blended or online or face-to-face. It's general to good teaching and good design in general. But it will help frame the kinds of things that we're trying to do. So the first thing that we tried to do with this, if our goal really is to prepare teachers, help teachers to acquire the skills that they need to be effective in blended teaching environments, the first thing that we need to do is understand what the competencies are that they need to have. And so we began doing that with a review of the existing blended teaching competencies. What was out there, and could we find any patterns or commonalities with the different competencies that exist? And there are two articles that has just recently been published in the Journal of Online Learning Research on that. This is the Pullum, Graham, and Short one at the bottom. And there's another one that's in press. And later on, I have the links to those. So if you're interested in looking up that research, you can look up that research. But this essentially tried to say, well, what is the existing conversation happening around competencies in this domain? The next thing that we're interested in is thinking about assessments. So once we understand what the competencies are, we need to understand how well students are achieving those competencies. This is especially important in a pre-service context because at least at BYU and most of the places that I'm aware of, students have very limited course options. The teacher preparation courses are already, programs are already some of the most credit-heavy programs around. And so the better we can understand where students are already in their competencies, the better we can tailor and personalize instruction to their needs and not just cover everything. We can cover the things that they're just in need of. So we're in the process of developing and validating at least two assessment instruments that can be used. One is what we call a blended teaching readiness instrument, and that's more of a self-report instrument where we identify skills and competencies and teachers self-report, and then they can, from that, know what skills they need to focus on to be competent in this area. In another one, we'll talk about this mostly today, later on in this presentation. The second one that is currently being worked on is by Emily Pullum as part of her dissertation is a more knowledge-oriented assessment. And I'm just going to turn the microphone over to Emily for a minute and a half to share about that. Emily?
Hi, hopefully everyone can hear me. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, the development of this knowledge assessment has been a long and winding road from finding out what are some of these unique outcomes or ideas around blended teaching. The main domains that I bet that Charles is going to discuss later on that the test addresses include personalization, using real-time data to assess student work on a formative level and summative, and mastery-based kinds of data that come from these personalized learning platforms. Technology-mediated interactions, can they detect or know how to navigate and facilitate good conversations with students online in like a discussion board or something? And then also, are they discerning of what, how to mix online and face-to-face elements of the educational experience for students to yield high quality experiences? So putting things in, in a way that the online stuff is also very well correlated with what's happening in the classroom, so you don't have a divide there. Right now, this test is open for anyone to take or trying to validate it. So we may share with you a link later that you can go to and take it if you are so inclined to see what it is we're working on. We're looking for partners who are willing to take our test and share it with blended teachers, traditional teachers, online teachers. So that's a little bit of background on that knowledge assessment.
Thanks, Emily. Would you just post a link to that in the chat space?
Absolutely, yeah, I will do. I'll post the link.
All right, so those two instruments are quite different, but they're both trying to focus on different aspects of these competencies. The third kind of leg of what we're trying to do is develop some materials and some OER resources that can be used by anybody to who's interested in developing these competencies, whether it be universities, pre-service programs, in-service programs and districts. So I should say in one of our kind of overriding values in all of this is that we believe in knowledge creation and in sharing things openly and freely. So all of these things that we're developing, so Emily will share the link to you, I'll share some links to the other things that we're doing. All of these things are Creative Commons licensed so that you can use them, you can adjust them, adapt them, do research on them, whatever you want. We hope that it will prompt and help you with whatever your needs are, or whatever the other needs are that are out there. And our primary goal is building knowledge and helping push this domain forward so that people can be skilled. So the two kinds of activities or content-oriented things that we're doing is we're developing an OER text, which we hope will be done by the end of the summer. So if there's anybody who would like to be a reviewer or look at early copy of that, maybe midway through the summer, please let me know, and you could maybe help us, help provide input on that. We're also developing a OER course within Canvas that will be Creative Commons licensed that people can use, take apart, take pieces of, use whatever you want. But those are two of the main things that we're doing there. I want to just acknowledge the work of Cecil Short in this too. He's a doctoral student here who's also a former English teacher, high school English teacher, and contributing in important ways to this work. So to begin with, that first piece, trying to understand what the competencies are, we did an extensive lit review, and we're kind of surprised to find that there's really limited peer-reviewed research on blended teaching competencies. We expanded, at that point, we expanded our lit review to include white papers and reports from professional organizations like INACOL and the Clayton Christian Institute. And we also included some work from organizations like the Learning Accelerator, who had done some significant work in this domain, but not peer-reviewed research, but other kind of work that we thought was useful and as we looked at it, felt was fairly rigorous. We ended up with 8 source documents that we analyzed. And I'll show a few examples here below of those. So here's kind of the competency structure from the INACOL blended teaching competencies. So they have 4 main competency areas: mindsets, qualities, adaptive skills, and technical skills. And then these are the kind of the subcategories in their competencies that you can see. Here is the competencies from Oliver's blended learning profile. This was done as part of, it was begun as part of a dissertation, and then moved into kind of a for-profit, I think a for-profit organization. We had some conversations with her. Let's see, let me, Jakai, can you have your hand up for a question? Would you go ahead and ask your question?
Oh, thank you. My question is related to the previous slide about the competencies, how you have the, can you go back to the, one more? So one more, yes. So next one. So, oh, next one. I mean,
this one?
Next one, 15.
15, okay.
Yes. So the readiness instrument knowledge assessment, when Emily's talking, I was wondering, because a lot of things she's talking about sounds a lot like when we are talking about online teaching. So I wonder whether, the blended and the online, so whether, how does blended make it very different from the online teaching competencies and the readiness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think if you'll go look at these articles, you'll get an idea for that. So I'll provide a really brief summary for that. One of the things that we're finding in the K-12 blended space is that there's much less emphasis right now on the the human technology mediated interaction. We don't think that that's necessarily should be the case, but what's happening right now is that most of the blends that we're seeing fall into the category of what we call rotation blends, or what the Clayton Christensen Institute would call rotation blends, which are much closer to the face-to-face experience than to the fully online experience. And so teachers are doing a lot of interacting with students, but most of the teachers' interaction with the students is not mediated in the online space. So I would encourage you to go look at that. I think that this is something that will evolve, and we'll see a greater emphasis in blended teaching in the future on this learner-human interaction piece in the top left quadrant. But right now, that's more limited in most of the blends that we're seeing.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. Love questions like that. Okay, so Oliver and Blended Learning Profile, they're doing some good work here. I think my understanding is they're trying to create some tools that their company can use with districts and will end up being more paid, while we're trying to do something that's a little more open and Creative Commons licensed. IBSTIPI, for those who are involved with AECT, know that this is associated with the AECT organization, and these competencies were created. I highlight them because they were not included in our list, but are similar to some of the things that we also found. They were not included in our list because they're not focused on K-12, and they tried to create the competencies in such a general way that they would address face-to-face, online, and blended. But you can see these are kind of more instructional design oriented, process oriented competencies. Here are links to the two articles that I was talking about, the Lit Review that looks at K-12 blended teaching competencies, and then this article in JOLR, which focuses on some specific aspects of the competencies. One of the things we found as we looked at those competencies is that many of the competencies, when teachers looked at them, they would say, oh yeah, I'm doing that. And they didn't really have the online competency or the blended competency at all. But the competency was written in such a general way that it wasn't useful in trying to create instruction around the specific blended skills. So one specific example of this would be provides good feedback, right? That's a competency that could be used across all three modalities. But without some additional guidance, it's not clear what skills it actually takes to do that well in a blended context versus, a traditional face-to-face only context.
Charles, can I just say something really fast? Yeah, if you want to, there's no link to the publication of the Lit Review, but I have put it in the chat. For those, it's a pre-publication manuscript to my academia profile. So just so you know, it's on there.
So that would be the pre-publication manuscript for that one that will be appearing in distance education sometime soon.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Emily and Jakai, if you could put your virtual hands down now so I know if you have another question, I'll know if you're trying to ask a question. Okay, so This is something that's coming from one of those articles. This is the analysis of and synthesis of all 8 documents together. And I know you probably can't see it very well in this picture, so I'm going to zoom out so you can see it a little bit better. The most common set of competencies fit into this large category of pedagogy, around pedagogy, how to teach in that space. And you can see some of the subcategories from our coding, flexibility and personalization, mastery-based learning, student-centered learning, and so on. The next biggest category was what we call management. And this has to do with managing, classroom management, managing the class, establishing expectations, and so on. You can see kind of some of the subcategories in that area. The next ones were tech assessment and technology, how to do those, use those skills in a blended context. You can see some of the subcategories there. Once again, I'm going to say that many of these competencies that were coded, if you'll look at that JOLR article, we found to be fairly generic and less helpful in terms of actually helping, when the rubber hits the road of trying to help someone develop the competency to teach in a blended context, there wasn't enough specificity. They were too general. And the last one is a set of 4 instructional design, dispositional competencies or standards, things related to improvement, and then a category where we fit, everything else that didn't fit into one of those larger categories. So any questions to this point? There was a question about whether we have a link to these maps and stuff. This is actually in the article that was published. So if you go look, you'll see it there. I will make a Google presentation out of this and post it up. Maybe I can send the link to somebody at AECT and they can share it out more widely. Florence, maybe I can do that with you and you can send it out. So the process that we went through to develop our instrument, the blended teaching readiness instrument, was we reviewed the existing frameworks. I just talked about that process. Then from that, we developed a competency structure and developed items for constructs that we would measure. We solicited external feedback from a small group of experts in the field. These are mostly experts related to research in blended and online K-12 contexts. And we also solicited district administrator feedback from a partnership district we're working with. And then we also piloted instrument with practicing teachers to see if there were words or terms or things that were unfamiliar to them. And then we made adjustments in this process. So that's kind of the big picture process. This is the model that we ended up with for our phase 1 development. We started out with a section on foundations, foundational skills, and the subsections there were technological literacy, digital citizenship, and dispositional items. We decided in this first round to take process view, mostly based on recommendation from the district. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we have a section on planning, which has to do with planning blended activities and planning blended assessments. Then our largest section is on instructional methods and strategies. So we had sections on personalizing instruction, facilitating student-student interaction, facilitating student-instructor interaction, and then student content interaction. And then finally, we had a section on assessment and evaluation. And those subsections were implementing blended assessments and evaluating and reflecting. Here is the measurement model that we developed. So for each one of these large constructs, there were the subconstructs that I shared with you. Each of the subconstructs had a number of items that the teachers would be able to respond to. The demographics of the people who participated in this initial study to try and validate this model and this instrument are listed here. One thing that I wanted to highlight that we thought was quite interesting is that only about half of our participants actually had any experience in teaching blended. And so I think this is going to be a common issue as we move forward, that there'll be a lot of people in the districts or the pre-service teachers that we work with that don't have experience teaching blended and need that very basic experience. So yeah, I'm having a hard time managing the chat at the same time. There's a question about if we can share the presentation with the DDL membership. I'm happy to do that. Like I said, everything we're doing is open. So I'll send links to the, I don't know, Florence, if you're the right person, I'll send links to Florence and she can post them for everybody to see. So in structural equation modeling research, for those who are not familiar, you create a measurement model, you create a structural model, you collect your data, and then you use a different set of fit statistics, which are statistical tests to see if your data fit the structural models that you have created. And so our initial model that had 57 items in it had good fit in 2 of the 4 most common fit statistics. We dug deeper to see which items weren't matching well with the statistics. We identified 2 items that weren't playing well with the other items. We removed those items, and once we removed those 2 items, we were able to get good fit across all the fit statistics. So this was really positive for us. We were happy about that we were able to get good fit for those. One of the things that we, which basically means it's a way of validating this, the model for measuring these things. One of the things that we learned, and some of this research was going on simultaneously to the end part of the lit review process. One of the things that we learned in that, and with our partners, was that this area of classroom management and how to manage a blended classroom could be strengthened in our instrument. And so we've decided that in the phase 2, which is actually being taken right now, and we're collecting data right now to try and validate the phase 2 of this, we've included a 5th section, a 5th construct, which we call management, and it has sections about managing the learning environment and managing the learning routines within that blended environment. We also, in phase 2, have decided to try and test out another model, which is not focused on process like the first model that we've been validating, but focuses more specifically on pedagogy. Let me just pause here for a sec because I noticed that Catherine raised her hand. So Catherine, go ahead and ask your question.
It was a few slides back. You mentioned the participants, only half had done blended. That slide. And what year or when did you when were you testing this?
So this was last year.
Okay. All right.
So I think most of it was happening last summer, or right before the school year ended. So about a year ago this time.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, your participants were from across the nation, or?
No, these participants were all from a large district on the East Coast.
Okay,
or back east, yeah.
Thanks.
One of the larger districts in the country, but yeah, they were all from one. We would love, Catherine and others, as we continue to expand this out, there's always needs to, to have, more people try it. So, if you're open, we'd love to collaborate with you. So this is the simplified model that we're also testing or developing and planning on testing. So the idea is that many K-12 teachers create their own instruction, create their own lessons and stuff, but there are also many who are less involved in the creation process and more involved in the, not the instructional design process, but involved in the implementation process, the actual teaching and implementing of the blended curriculum. And so this focuses more specifically on that. The integration piece, which is combining blended and online instruction, which also includes the managing the combination of those two in the classroom, a piece on technology mediated interaction, a piece on how they can personalize instruction, and then a piece on the real-time data practices. And so part of our rationale for creating this parallel instrument is that it's also a simpler instrument with fewer items and focusing more specifically on the pedagogy pieces. So here are links to these two instruments that are accessible to you. You can go in and look at them and see what the items look like, what the items in the different areas look like, but we have the process model and this more pedagogy model. And I think I don't know if I have time to go out and look at that right now. Maybe I will do it really quickly. So I'm just going to open up a window here, type that in, but what I'm going to have to do in Zoom is stop sharing and then reshare. So this is the readiness assessment. You can see that there's some stuff up front about what grades people are teaching and their background skill set. Then if you come in these first three sections, technical literacy, digital citizenship, and dispositions, you can see the items for each one ranked from a very limited ability to very high ability as people are self-evaluating. Let's go down to maybe personalizing instruction so you can see that. Rate your ability to do the following: use data collected online to customize students' learning experience. Use data collected online to determine which groups or individual students need additional instructional support. Answer students' course-related questions online, in addition to being able to do it in person. Use student performance data to provide timely help with misconceptions, and then address any limitations of educational software through individual or small group instruction. So feel free to go through and look at those. I'm going to quickly show you the other instrument that's focused on these 4 categories: integration and management, real-time data practices, personalization, and tech-mediated interaction. So this one has not been validated yet, but we're in the process of finishing up the expert review and the work with teachers on the ground to look at it. There you can see the integration and management questions, real-time data practices, personalization, and then the technology-mediated interactions section. And then we've added a section also that's just related to dispositions at the end of this one. And so the idea with the the blended teaching readiness self-evaluation is that a district or a program or even individuals could use that to do a pre-assessment and see where people are at the beginning of their programs, what skills they have, what skills they don't think they have, and then maybe they can focus more specifically on the skills and the competencies that they need to focus on. So these 4 elements in the pedagogy model, the integration, tech-mediated interaction, personalization, and real-time data practices, those are the 4 areas that we're focusing the readiness instrument and the knowledge assessment and these 2 teaching resources around. And then, so I guess here's the last steps, the next steps. Okay, Emily's got your hand raised, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, it looks like Ulrich, I'm sorry, I don't want to pronounce your name incorrectly, asked a question in the chat, asking about were there any skills that seemed to be more important than any others or needed more emphasis? I think this might be pertaining to the lit review. I thought I'd just bring that to your attention, see if you wanted to answer that question.
Yeah, sure. So, in the literature review, some of the things that we found were some of the most important is why they appear in this pedagogy-oriented one, and it's the personalization skills and the real-time data practices seem to be heavily emphasized there. So if teachers don't know how to use the online tools to see where students are and then make appropriate decisions about how to individualize or customize or personalize instruction for the students, then they won't be able to be very effective blended teachers. Emily, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just say that the things that needed more emphasis, I think both Charles and I were surprised that a lot of the literature only briefly mentioned the importance of nurturing online technology-mediated interactions. So a lot of blended teachers know how to use technology, but they don't interact with their students using technology. They, because they have a face-to-face component, all of their energy goes to communicating with students and parents in traditional ways. And so, for example, on the Learning Accelerators website, they're so focused on basically the software platforms that students are using just for content interaction, and then the teacher interpreting that and then doing any kind of communication with students in person. So there's a case to be made for how early is too early for online student discussions. for helping them get along in that point. But higher education probably does a lot more with technology mediated interactions, such as online discussion boards and collaborations. So we saw that as being kind of a deficit, and that's why we chose to put that into our assessment instrument and kind of keep that in people's minds, that they need to have the skills that address that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And I think this area too of the technology mediated interaction, we personally believe that as blended learning and teaching matures in the K-12 space, we'll see more of that. It's just that the most prevalent models right now are the station rotation models, to use the Clayton Christensen, Horn and Staker kind of jargon. And so that's what's happening in a lot of the schools. But there are other models that depend more heavily on interactions between teachers and students. And I think as the domain matures, we'll see more and more of those models being used. And so we wanted to make sure to include that as an important part of the overall structure. Jake has a question. Go ahead, Jake.
Yes, several slides ago you mentioned that you validated the instrument with a group of practicing teachers. And I was just wondering, I noticed on the most recent slide you mentioned the next steps being professional development with in-service and pre-service teachers. Have you used the instruments yet with pre-service teachers? If so, what does that look like? And if not, do you expect a need to alter any of the items for that population?
That is a great question. Our intention is to create something that could be used for both pre-service and in-service teachers. The teachers, basically what we're thinking is novice teachers. But I think the question is open for validation. We have not validated it with pre-service teachers. We're using it with our current pre-service teachers, but based on, I don't know if you remember way back from the beginning when, when I talked about the administrative rules that have gone into place, this is the first year that we've actually had a required course on blended teaching. So we're developing, we piloted and developed that course coming up. So our numbers in our pre-service program have actually been fairly small to date. And I think we're going to see those numbers grow and grow. And so we will be able to do some validation work with, on the pre-service level. And if any of you have access to pre-service teachers or pre-service programs that would like to try this out and do some of the validating work or collaborate with us on some of the validating work, would love to do that with you. It just has not been done to date.
Thank you.
Great question. Let's collaborate. Finally, these next steps that I meant that Jake was referring to, finalize and validate the new instrument that includes the new management items. We're in the process of doing that. Use the instrument to measure teacher needs and readiness and the effectiveness of PD efforts. Once we get instruments that are, that we can trust and that are valid, then we can start to use those instruments to look at different interventions, different kinds of professional development efforts and programs to see how well those programs are helping our teachers to move the dial on their competencies. Using the framework to develop a professional development series, how we might differentiate that instruction based on, age, content, novice, expert, past experience. There's a lot of different questions that could be asked that we haven't even started to think about. And then finally, we can study professional development implementation with the pre-service and in-service teachers. And one of the things that I think we've seen with the pre-service teachers is pre-service teachers don't have the same pedagogical experience to draw on that the in-service teachers do. So in-service teachers might be able to look at a blended pedagogy and say, I can really see how that would work and improve the instruction for my students, whereas the pre-service teachers have less experience there to draw on and to use as they try and learn how to blend. So, that is the end of the stuff that I have to prepare. I'm grateful for those who came and, listened and have, had questions. I will get the Google Slides out to AECT, and we will, we're happy to collaborate with you in ways or share with you what we have. Like I said, our primary goal is to push this research in this domain forward so that we can improve the lives of students and teachers and understand better how to make blended learning effective around the country. So are there any last questions that you have, or ones that maybe flashed through in the chat that I wasn't able to attend to that you want to vocalize that I can try and address in our last 3 minutes? Okay.
It looks like, Dr. Graham, I wanted to take the time to thank you very much for accepting our invitation and doing this webinar today. And yeah, if you send me the slides, I'll be glad to post it on the DDL Facebook page, and we can also email it. And those of you, even if you're not part of DDL, you can access that page and download both the recording to this and also the slides.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I hope to interact with you in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Florence, it looked like you were able to stay connected the whole time. So
yeah, it looks like I actually got disconnected once, but it automatically reconnected me. Yeah, the Charlotte Airport network is not bad. And it was a very interesting study. I myself am interested in competencies, but I'm looking more at online competencies, more for preparing faculty. But this is very interesting.
Are you looking at the K-12 or higher ed?
Higher ed. Mostly higher ed, yeah. I haven't done a whole lot of work with K-12. The only thing I'm beginning to look at in K-12 is I'm looking at digital citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have an NSF grant. So as part of that, I'm building some modules, and we're teaching teachers on digital citizenship and to take it to their classrooms. Yeah, and it was nice to see that you had included, that was part of a competency, and that came up in this section.
It's really hard because ultimately, when you're looking at competencies, you have to make judgments about how comprehensive you're going to be versus how parsimonious you're going to be, right?
Yeah.
Because if you create something that's too comprehensive, it's not practical, because you're not going to be able to have a student or a teacher that takes, answers 150 questions, and takes 2 hours to do something.
That's too long, yeah.
So there is this kind of balance that you're trying to strike, and that's part of, you see kind of that tension a little bit in the presentation where he talked about the kind of process-oriented model that had, 55 items, and then up to 65 items, and then trying to figure out a kind of a simpler model too. So.
Yeah, exactly. But very interesting work. So thank you so much.
Well, thank
Hopefully
you.
I'll get to meet you in person someday at one of the conferences.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you, Florence. Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Each morning